the American Constitutional Republic, affairs of state in Oklahoma, the beliefs, principles, opinions, and views of people like you. This is 3D Politics Live, featuring David Vann, creator and editor of Sooner Politics, expert on Oklahoma state government, professional advocate for those needing mental health care, state committeeman for Tulsa County GOP, and candidate now for vice chair. Also featuring David Oldham, founder and scholar at Constitutional Grounds, political leader, educational speaker, former state of Oklahoma elector for the United States Electoral College, and of course, director and host Tommy McKay, your fine verbal Viking, comedian, political humorist, father of five, and former Tulsa mayoral candidate. Here we are again for 3D Politics Live. Both Davids, we have made it once again on the air. What do you guys say today? Anything new before we jump in? I promise this time minimum wage discussion for hard times. But before we get started, what do you guys know before we go?
I've got a special attaboys to both you coming from the Creek County Republican Party for what you guys did last December, helping a young college kid get a Patriot rally. And I had a fine day on Saturday with the entire Republican Party of Creek County.
Wow, excellent.
Awesome.
That was the Manford thing?
Yeah, they're part of Creek County. You remember Chairman Rob Ford was there. Rob held the convention.
Right.
We had a great time. Of course, I was giving my stump speech, running for vice chair, but it was a great day. Great day.
Yeah, that was good stuff. Oldham really schooled him that day on the.
You like that one, huh?
Well, their jaws were just dropping. Plus your shoes. You got some really nice shoes, by the way.
Oh, well, Lori helped me.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
He married up, and it shows.
Oh my gosh! Here we go. Here we go. But as you guys,
you marry, right?
That's right. I've been chomping at the bit to talk about minimum wage and to set this up. One of the things I learned years ago from my dad was the effect of doubling. You know what the most dangerous game to bet on because of the odds you can lose by? Do you guys know the trivia question? You know what game you?
It's blackjack.
Oh,
No?
well, here's where I'll contend. What I learned was backgammon because of the doubling cube. Because doubling is the concept that leads us to exponential numbers. That's how you get to the third power, etc. Is through the concept of doubling. And so the idea of doubling is really a radical and extreme concept. My father showed me that you can take 0.036 of an inch, which is about the thickness of one sheet of newspaper, and you don't have to fold it too many times before you're already at the thickness that takes you to the moon, because you start doubling so many feet and pretty soon you're in the miles instantly. And when you're in the miles, you're at the moon. And so the idea of doubling is a radical and extreme idea. And so here is the headline to lead us into the minimum wage. Biden, Democrats seek ambitious hike in U.S. minimum wage. This is from John Beers out of Delphine. I don't know how to pronounce it. Touitou, Touitou, which is a French publication or area. So here's from the article. When President Joe Biden unveiled a $1.9 trillion stimulus proposal earlier this month, few were surprised by the plan's hefty price tag or sweeping scope. More striking was Biden's inclusion of a measure to more than double the federal minimum wage to $15. So here we are with what I consider to be extreme radicalism, doubling the minimum wage. And why is it radical? Because he's talking about doubling, which is insanely radical. It doesn't seem like it is, but it is. Doubling is exponential spending is what that is. So to set us off here, just a little quick, because I'm chomping at the bit, about the colloquialpedia, which is what I call Wikipedia, because it's where all the morons go to look, so that's where I go to look first. 1349, it's basically, they claim that there was a maximum wealth in 1349 from some guy who didn't want the nobles to get too rich. But in 1602 is, well, the welfare state, in my opinion, starts. Queen Elizabeth starts basically what becomes the poor tax. But I'll give you guys a chance to respond now. Pretense of the minimum wage laws is that it protects the worker from the employer, when actually the minimum wage laws restrict the employee more than they restrict the employer. Anybody else before I go on?
My son has talked about that very fact for years. You know, he's 30 now, nearly, and he's talked about it for years because he experienced it as a worker. He had trouble getting hired, partly because of minimum wage. The other thing was Obamacare, which was adding to the minimum wage because it was forcing companies, the company that he was trying to work for, forcing them to wait until everything shook out, partly because of expense, partly because of the unknown at the time back in 2009-10. But yeah, he's talked about this, that it really restricts the employee. I know as a parent and one who wanted to obey the law back in the day, that I feared hiring my own children and paying them a child's wage because of minimum wage law. I went through that.
Now you're getting into child labor law too.
Exactly. But they're my children, and yet I had this thing running through my head. Well, I struggled for the word, and the one that I want to say I don't want to say on air. But it's just evil that we can't decide what we want to pay, and it goes back to what I've been talking about, that they don't have the right to rule us, either the employee or the employer.
Van, what do you got?
Well, Tom Brady put on a good show yesterday, and his salary is set by his marketplace, by the conditions. And people think, well, he shouldn't be making more than a school teacher. Well, let me say,
in a market for long if they keep this up, because the NFL sucks.
Yeah, my point being, in a market, a job has a value that's set by supply and demand. And that's true of whether it's carrying out groceries at a grocery store or throwing footballs down the field. Every job has a value. And when the government comes in and artificially draws a line here, what they're essentially doing is saying, you either move that job up to a higher value than the marketplace is set, or we just get rid of the job. Now, I've had several jobs as a kid. Delivering newspapers was first. Do kids do that anymore? No. Fact is, nobody does, right? Shining shoes. Okay, well, that still exists, but a lot of things have changed. Pumping gas at a gas station. When's the last time you hired somebody other than New Jersey to pump gas for you?
Or Oregon.
Okay, in Oregon. Yeah. Carrying out groceries at a grocery store.
Because I didn't know better.
Yeah, but those are all jobs I did as a kid. Every one of them is gone now. Now, some things are just paradigm shift, but some things are direct response of what minimum wage has done to force laborers to pay somebody more than the job is worth.
All right. We're into the weeds of the mechanism. Let's get back into the philosophies of the minimum wage laws. And my contention is that the minimum wage laws create criminals in two different ways, one by mechanism and one by degradation of society. The employee is restricted and legally prohibited from bargaining for his own wage. If he does so, he's a criminal. And so,
okay, Tom, you think you're getting us out of the weeds?
not out of the weeds. Into the weeds of the philosophy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Other weeds, man. So if a person is legally barred from getting a job despite their willingness to work, it's quite easy to understand that they may turn to a life of crime. So there's two different ways that minimum wage laws either create or encourage crime. Now, here's the one I really want to get into. With nonverbal communication, what's 90% of communication is nonverbal communication. And my contention is that the employment for the employee is 90% something other than wage. Who gets paid only looking at the dollars. Otherwise, ladies would always make their money horizontal because that's where they can make the most money the most often. But they don't go for how much money. Why? Because they want a minimum love of job.
I'm sorry, Tom. That had gone way over my head, but on the rebound, I got it. Okay.
Okay.
Horizontal comment.
Sticks with me as fast as they can. I talk fast. You got to listen fast too. But the fact is, minimum love of job is not guaranteed by the government.
Yeah.
They reduce you to a number that's called wage. You're not guaranteed any exposure in the industry. You're not guaranteed any experience in the industry. And what are the two things you want more than the money? Exposure in the industry and experience in the industry. And they give you none of that. Okay. I love this one here that I came up with. Minimum wage laws deny the tenets of both capitalism and communism from each according to his ability, to each according to government dictate. This is the way they work it. So it even though, remember, the labor movement was a capitalist movement to start, and the communists, like they are parasites, always do, come in and they usurped it and took over the laborers' unite routine where we own our own labor. Okay. Well, we get to bargain for our own labor. The communists came in and unionized that bull crap. And the fact is now it's according to government dictate. You don't get according to your need. You get according to what the government dictate is. There's no freedom of alternatives. Useful idiots believe that laborers' need is defined by government. And that's the screw of communism, is they lie to you. And they tell you according to your need. No, according to their dictate.
Yeah.
Well, and just to completely support your position there, look at McDonald's, look at Walmart now, where because of the minimum wage going up in some of these markets, now you go in and there are no employees. Everything is self-checked. You have the kiosk at McDonald's. You now have self-check aisles, and some stores are 100% self-check. There is one assistant there to help you check out, and that is the only person there for the 7 or 8 self-check things. Yeah. And there's no regular checkout aisle.
Okay, let me add to that, Oldham. I want to elaborate more. You know that you used to be able to, by happenstance, get help in the departments at Walmart. But now Walmart, because they say they're 24 hours, the reason why is because they don't want their stockers being interrupted to help customers, so they have them do it at 2 a.m. You understand?
No, I didn't quite follow you.
They would rather do their stocking shelves at 2 a.m. than 2 p.m, because at 2 p.m, they'll get interrupted by people wanting customer service.
Right.
Amazing. Okay.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, there's always a more of a skeleton shift at night, just doing the stocking than there is during the day, because that's when people are out and busy. And so you're gonna see customer service go down the tubes. You already see it. For a while at Home Depot or Lowe's, you couldn't find anybody to help you in the aisles with their department. Now you're starting to see, because they had to bring back some people because they were suffering in the customer service arena.
Absolutely.
They had to bring some people back. Now government's going to come in and want to dictate again, and you're going to see it go down again.
Yeah.
And until prices rise, a tax on everyone.
Yeah.
Until prices rise to then meet what they need to supply.
Once again, you guys are listening to 3D Politics Live with your fine verbal Viking and host Tommy McKay, David Van, and David Oldham, as usual, right here every Monday on Facebook Live with 3D Politics. Tonight we're discussing minimum wage, and we've got more about the Stitt administration, about the CARES money. And we've got a guest that we're going to talk about coming up next week. And the posthumous excommunication of the the ex-president. But I've got another great analogy on this minimum wage thing here about you guys familiar with the Cambrian explosion where fossils are concerned? You ever heard of the Cambrian?
I vaguely remember it.
Well,
I've slept since then.
The Cambrian explosion is the fossil record when essentially every animal philo we know today exploded onto the scene in divine fashion with no evolutionary record before it.
Okay.
That's why
Yep.
they call it an explosion. And so this is the minimum wage problem, is that the minimum wage denies the reality of a gradient scale growth of skills in demand for a litmus test of an explosion in a skill for a beginner. See, marketable skills that require hours of practice do not suddenly pop into existence like the Big Bang. Okay, so what they're expecting from the minimum wage law is that the kid or the young intro worker will simply have zero skills and then suddenly be worth minimum wage. And that's why my line here, do minimum wage workers manifest themselves without evolutionary explanation like the divine Cambrian explosion? And the answer, of course, is no. President Roosevelt, 1937, quote, all but the hopeless reactionary will agree that to conserve our primary resources and manpower, government must have some control over maximum hours, minimum wages, the evil of child labor, and the exploitation of organized labor. That's a typo. Exploitation of unorganized labor is what he said. But look how Roosevelt in 37 says the hopeless reactionary, like the person who privately owns property, must agree that government should have control over maximum hours, minimum wages, and the evil of child labor, which means they're going to control the amount you can make, how much you get paid, and David's children.
Well, and let's also understand a little bit of the history that led up to this. Talk about a man-caused disaster, to use Obama's phrase. This was all government created. Now, before the government got behind the unionization and the labor, they were supporting people like J.P. Morgan and people like that who were and Carnegie in the steel strikes, and they were actually sending out the army and shooting strikers.
Yeah.
And their encampments, because they actually made an encampment, had women and children come to the encampment to stay there with them, and they shot into tents and everything else. That was the army beforehand. So instead of finding some regulatory minimum, where they started refereeing between the sides and making sure everybody played fair, instead of that, they flipped sides and they just went to the other side.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So when you read this stuff from FDR, remember, FDR is just wanting us to flip sides, and by doing so, create tyranny, a tyrannical scheme by which anybody could then get their mitts on things.
Right, all in the name of the evil child labor laws, which is a whole story. You can go into that, where the poor ladies trying to work needed to take their kids with them so they could work, and they acted like the children. I know
there was exploitation.
Of course, there's always some exploitation that happens with that, but a lot of Van, what do you got?
Well, I want to say that did lead to a backlash, and we even saw it here in Oklahoma in the early days of statehood. And if you'll read our Constitution of Oklahoma, you'll see it. We had a very socialist leaning. And why did that happen? Because all of a sudden the immigrant classes who had been exploited, definitely had in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, started to vote, and this just changed a lot of things. So it works both ways here.
Right. Yeah.
It's true, but the main point I'm trying to bring out about the minimum wage laws is they're deceitful. They don't do what they say. They do the opposite of what they say. They don't protect the employee. They protect the employer much more. Also, they're disingenuous with their use. 1993. Representative John Dent from Pennsylvania used the minimum wage laws to favor his desired factories in the North to compete with the factories in the South. He said, quote, "We had to do something. We were losing all our jobs to the South." So they used the minimum wage not to protect the employee, to manipulate the factories the way they want them.
Yeah.
Well, to protect their factory employees.
The one they're
the ones down in the South.
No, it's not. It's not capitalism. It's fascism. What'd you call it the other day, Van? It's not crony capitalism.
Protectionism. It is crony capitalism.
Yeah. Crony capitalism is actually textbook fascism or corporatism.
It's I want to deny the use of crony capitalism, because when you add the crony, it's no longer capitalism.
That's right.
It's some other thing.
And now, Tom, we got another aspect to this that's important, because when you see the government become the employer and they set a minimum wage, for instance, teacher wages.
Right.
And when you see that at least a third of the teachers in our public schools are getting minimum wage, minimum teacher wage, now all of a sudden you're seeing that's arbitrary. But here's another reason for it. I have a brother-in-law who's a great educator in the Minnesota public schools. He's going to retire early because they offered him this really sweetheart deal, his local school district. And I said, why would they want to get rid of their best teachers? And he smiled. He said, they really don't want the best educators. They want the cheapest educators.
That's the same exact. This is a cyclical story. They do it on a regular basis. That's the exact textbook story that they did to my grandmother back in 1970.
Yeah,
my mother.
She taught 40 years in Tulsa public schools. They forced her out with that.
But Tom, this is not the legislature's fault. This is the school board's fault.
Districts pay teachers. I'm so sick of hearing Dr. Deborah Gist complaining, we can't keep the lights on. We'll try the switch, honey.
But I'm saying tomorrow's election for school board up in Owasso is a very important race. There's other ones around the state. It's important you understand they are getting lied to by these school boards who said, we're here to protect the parents' interests. And they're not.
No.
They're giving you the worst teachers, the cheapest teachers they can find.
Right. The repeal of the 17th Amendment and take over the school board, that are the two things we can do to save this country. So to quickly finish this off before the half hour, Congress raised the minimum wage in nominal terms by 46% between 1977 and 1981. A federal commission estimated that the minimum wage hikes there resulted in a loss of 644,000 jobs, including jobs that were not created. 1983 General Accounting Office report found teenage workers have greater job losses relative to their share of the population or the unemployed workforce. That is worse than adults. That is, the minimum wage hurts teenage workers mostly. Okay.
Absolutely.
President Carter's minimum wage study commission noted that, quote, an explicit purpose of the minimum wage was and is to protect adult workers from low wage competition from youth, end quote. Okay, well, that didn't tell me anything about protecting the minimum wage worker. That just says ageism. We're trying to protect these old folks can't work as fast. Congress raised the minimum wage in 1989 from $3.35 an hour to $4.25 an hour. A 1991 National Restaurant Association survey found that as a result of that legislation, 44% of restaurants were forced to reduce the number of employee hours worked, and 42% reduced the number of people employed. So minimum wage crushes jobs and kills children. Okay. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich Clinton administration argued for a minimum wage hike on July 20th of 1993 for one reason. The hike was for, quote, public perception, end quote. One more and then I'm done. Even some federal courts have ruled some convicts must be paid the minimum wage for work they perform in prison. And that is from a San Francisco Chronicle, June 25, 1992, by Jim Doyle's quote from the title, Some Inmates Entitled Minimum Wage. These things are all documented.
I can attest to the California thing. Because I was there when they were doing it. Now we got to go back because I've got two things that I've got to mention.
Go ahead.
number one, back when Carter's his commission met and everything like that, the minimum wage applied to people, I believe it was 18 years or older, or 16 years or older. I think it was 18 years or older, and not
18.
to anybody below it. So therefore, what was happening was the minimum wage was protectionism, back to the crony capitalism, and but you were still allowed to hire the teenagers without necessarily paying them minimum wage because they were unskilled.
Oldham, hold that second point. I want to say it was called a training wage if you were under 18. I know because I had turned 18 that year and I got fired from my job so they could hire a 16-year-old to take my place.
See?
Yeah.
We have somebody, like Michael Savage was ruthlessly discriminated against. We have David, who's been discriminated against for wage, based on wage. He was that worth too much or worth too little?
Little, right. So on the way out, as we finish the minimum wage laws, and the whole point of me bringing this up is to prove how immoral Biden is by suggesting the radical concept of doubling the minimum wage. It is doubling is a radical, exponential, ridiculous, absurd maneuver, okay? And to radically double the minimum wage is an immoral act. Both the employer and employee accept government interference in a private contract. And my last punchline is exposure and experience come before wage to the beginning laborer. 2 of the 3 make the man. Wage is no more than a number. Let them make solar panels and eat cake. There you go.
Okay, there's one more thing that we got to throw in here before the break. And that is, remember that especially federal government wage contracts, union contracts, are tied to the minimum wage. So the way that these overpaid federal workers get bigger raises, raise the minimum wage. And when you double it, you double their salary.
That's
correct. So they're going to be making
correct
6 figures, just about every single one. That's why everybody wants to work for the government.
You weren't supposed to let that out, David.
That's exactly correct. Can't believe that's not on my list. But yes, that's exactly correct. Union wages.
That's why you have me.
Union wages are tied to minimum wages. Raise the minimum wages. Raise all the union wages.
Yeah. Oh, I got news for you. They just, passed this stimulus spending. The Democrats did it. You know what else is in there, David? We in Oklahoma, in our federal taxes, we just bailed out California's debt. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know how I feel about that. Here's the thing that we've all got to understand is we have got to start arresting and indicting our local people who are taking all this illegal money. We're going to talk about the CARES Act and what Governor Stitt is doing with it. Every dime of the CARES Act is illegal. And school board money, health money, etc., coming from the federal government. It's all illegal. Every single person who's participating in it is complicit. They should all be in jail along with, the feds. So.
Well, I'm really pleased you guys seem to agree with all my comments on the minimum wage.
No, it was great. You did a good job.
There's a lot of comments in there that are documented. It's not just like flying around. It's amazing how documented this stuff is and how backwards the reality is from the way that they sell it.
Well, and I wonder when we on the right are going to throw off fascism and throw off this kind of garbage that keeps everybody down and literally creates a lower working class because we are destroying the training market, to use David's term from back in the day.
That is correct. We are once again 3D Politics Live. As everybody knows, we go every Monday night. And tonight is no different than that. Next week, we've got all sorts of stuff coming up. I want to thank Kim is out there. Ethan's out there. Brian is out there. April and Norma, everybody watching. It's exciting. We're glad to have you. Once again, here we are. Well, here we are again. The American Constitutional Republic. The affairs of state in Oklahoma. The beliefs, principles, opinions, and views of people just like you. This is 3D Politics, featuring David Vann, creator and editor of Sooner Politics, expert on Oklahoma state government, professional advocate for those needing mental health care, and state committeeman for the Tulsa County GOP, and now candidate for vice chair. And also David Oldham, founder and scholar at Constitutional Grounds, political leader, educational speaker, former state of Oklahoma elector, United States Electoral College, David Oldham. And of course me, your verbal Viking, your plunderer of conversation, not afraid to say anything or ask any questions, Tommy McKay, your comedian, political humorist, father of 5, and former Tulsa mayoral candidate. Get over it, Tom. That's what they tell
I
me.
just have to say, we are going to have to step it up, Tom, because
Everybody.
I think I've counted 4 different camera views that David has.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
I think 4 different camera views now that he's flipping between.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, one of them sucks, but he figured that one out. He hasn't gone back to that one. But 4 different camera views?
That's true.
That's the one that sucks right there.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Well, you know, I got to have backups, folks. You know,
I'm working on this on a neighborhood Cirque du Soleil with the kid. And I just got to sign the waiver.
But here I am. All right.
So, hey, let's talk about, before we move into Stitt, let's talk about this, the posthumous excommunication of President Trump.
Oh.
So they're doing the second impeachment. So here it is. Like in the days following, this is from Sooner Politics, February 8th this year. Like in the days following Pope Formosus, the radicals of the left are choreographing a mockery of our founding fathers' constitutional process in their rabid denunciations of all that former President Donald Trump has accomplished in the good of the USA. Tell us about the cadaver synod, or is it the synod? Synod.
I have a Lutheran wife, so I'm an authority on this.
You know.
Synod, yes.
And what is the cadaver synod?
Oh gosh!
How does it tie into Trump?
Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church went through some very turbulent times in their very long history, and in the 9th century, what?
They
pay a minimum wage.
Did that.
In the 9th century, in their, the decline of the Roman Empire, I mean, there was all kinds of things going, because the empire was splitting up and there was factions, and the Roman Catholic Church trying to put it together. And so you had politics and religion mingling, like, on a global scale here. But this was really interesting. Because what you had was different political factions and fiefdoms and in different kingdoms that they wanted one of their own to control the Roman Church and stuff. And so you had these very political people. Well, there came to power a Pope Formosus. Pope Formosus, had his political enemies in Rome. And when he died, well, there was a riot and there was all kinds of things. And really quick, the conclave happened and they selected Pope Benedict VI. Well, he lasted 15 days and he was found dead. So then came
15 days to flatten the Pope.
Yeah. So then came Pope Stephen, but he was from a rival political faction in Rome, in Italy. And his people, he had a lot of very radical people backing him, and they kind of egged him on. So they had him dig up the corpse of Pope Formosus, who had been dead not even a year. They put him in vestments, propped him up on the papal throne in the Vatican, and tried him for, I don't know. But anyway, they found him guilty.
They tried the corpse.
The corpse, and found the corpse to be guilty. And they took off all those papal vestments, declared that his memory has to be removed. And so they chopped off the 3 fingers that he used when he would lay hands for blessings, papal blessings. They chopped him off. And then his body was found floating down the Tiberias River, and some monk found the body.
I'll
But
give up my papal blessings when you pry my cold dead fingers off. Well, I mean, Trump's got to feel lucky they're not digging him up. But I will say, I mean, they're literally trying to erase him. That's the pertinent part of this.
yes, right. Now, here's the lesson from history for those of us who still study history and haven't had the woke people tear down all of the, monuments and history books for you guys. This so affected the Catholic Church that they've done some radical changes since then. Back then, the popes were married. They were powerful families, aristocrats, right? And they had a lot of political power. You don't see that in the Catholic Church anymore. Largely, the bishops keep their priests. Number one, they can't be married. Number two, you stay out of the politics and you focus on the piety and the proselytes, not on the politics. You like those 3 P's? I did that by myself, Tom.
Alliteration there. That's some fine.
So anyway, there's a backlash can happen from this. And for Pope Stephen, who carried this out, he was arrested later that year and executed himself. These are popes they were executing. Yes.
Well, let's also remind everybody of a little bit of the background on this. Remember, Trump is gone. That's the posthumous part. His presidency is dead, as it were. I mean, effectively, whether we believe it was legitimate or not, he's not there. He is now going to be tried, and he's going to have what many have called a bill of attainder rendered against him via this trial.
Yes.
Now, and that's why, because the point of an impeachment is to impeach him and remove him from office, but he's already gone, and supposedly by election, and now it's a little late. It's like doing a bill of attainder against somebody who's already dead. Well, again, for those of us who look at a little bit of history, the English history is actually kind of replete with this sort of thing. Yeah. And during the War of the Roses and during Cromwell was actually tried posthumously for crimes against the crown, because he overthrew the crown. Thomas Cromwell had a bill of attainder against him, and his posterity had to pay it. He was dead. His posterity had to pay it, and that's why we have in our Constitution that the corruption of blood can only happen to the one who committed the crime, and not onto the posterity, and only during the life of the one attained. But attainment cannot happen through the legislature, which is what makes it a bill.
Right.
It has to happen through a due process of law, through a court. Right. So we're back to that same thing. Now put up that picture again.
Okay. Because I thought you were going there earlier.
Just a second.
The picture.
Because there's one more problem with this thing, aside from it, being posthumous, basically for his presidency. Want you to notice the guy David has here in the wig.
Yeah.
Yes. Put it back up real fast.
You betcha. I thought you were going there earlier. I didn't mean to step on you while you were talking.
Make sure that I have sharing privileges. Okay, I do.
Yes.
Okay, so note that face. Look at the face. Okay, take yours away. I've got to share mine.
Okay, just a second. There you go.
And Tom, you got to give me sharing privileges.
You don't have them?
It says I don't.
Share. Everybody should be able to share.
It says host disabled participant screen share.
Sorry, no, that was, I know why, because I had Van set up differently. My fault.
Right. And I want you to notice the face that David had there is Patrick Leahy.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm gonna talk about that here just a second. There we go.
Can you do it?
And we are, I believe it's right here. And share that.
Here we go.
Here. And I want you to notice the part that's highlighted there This is the trial of the president in impeachment. It says Senate shall have sole power to trial impeachments. Then the highlighted portion, when the president of the United States is tried, the chief justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. So what we have here is a situation whereby the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States will not sit and preside over this impeachment trial. He will
And
not
how
show
do you-
up.
and
It's been a
David-
month.
Tell us how you know he will not sit.
He has said so.
Absolutely.
Two
Okay.
entities of that description aren't going to be there. There's two entities of that description you showed us won't be there. The Chief Justice and the President of the United States.
Correct.
I mean, literally two of the three entities won't be there.
Correct. Because it's not an impeachment of the president, it's an impeachment of a former president. And so a good point, something I hadn't thought to point out. But so what you have is you have Patrick Leahy, who is now making the case that because he, as Senate pro tempore, sits in and presides over non-presidential impeachments, he therefore can sit and preside over the presidential impeachment. Absolutely 100% unconstitutional. This is a sham. Every single person who participates in it is guilty of violating their oath of office. Think about it. They're legitimizing an illegal process and an illegal trial. They're going to continue calling it an impeachment trial. That's what they're calling it. It starts tomorrow. They will call it that throughout and try to convince us all that it's legitimate.
All right, Van, what do you got?
Okay,
So-
David, you brought out a good point when you put up that text. You said 2/3 vote of members present. Now,
Correct.
some have said, well, then the Republicans just should not show up. But that's the surest way to get your 2/3
Well, it
conviction.
doesn't. The point is, it doesn't matter. The point
Well,
is,
my
it's
point is-
unconstitutional.
Yeah.
If you participate, you.
So what's the other
legitimize.
But my point is, if everybody who voted no, and followed Rand Paul's motion,
Correct.
those 45 should just flat out vote no on this. I don't think they would be violating what you're saying by they just vote no. There's no impeachment here.
Well, you could show up just at the end and just saying, there's no conviction, but they should not be participating at all. They shouldn't be asking questions. They shouldn't be doing anything to advance the narrative. Maybe going outside of the narrative and asking questions that nobody wants asked. That would be good.
Well, and
So
what was the process where Kamala Harris immediately opened by interrupting and sticking her heels in the mud? Remember that? They started some process, and before they could even start, I think it might have been the Kavanaugh thing. And the first thing she did was, I want to object to, I'm a woman, or whatever her problem was. And she opened up the whole thing by immediately obstructing, essentially. Okay. She didn't further the constitutional process in that situation. And what Oldham's saying is they shouldn't further the unconstitutional process in this case. I don't think they shouldn't just not show up. I think they should show up, stick their heels in, and say, hey, I object, essentially, and somebody else second the motion. Tommy McKay here, your fine, perspicuous plunderer of conversation and verbal Viking, along with David Oldham and David Van, every Monday night right here on Facebook Live. And don't forget to check out our website, facebooklive.com, where you're going to catch all of the videos and also the blogs that we're starting to put up there.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
I want to say, though, there's an axiom in politics. When your opponent's making a fool of themselves, get out of the way.
Right.
Just let them. I think they've already realized they stepped in it, the Democrats. Okay. And that's why they aren't going to have any witnesses. They're going to rush this through. It'll be done before they go home for the weekend.
Well, their indictment happened in a mere few hours.
Sure.
I mean, nothing. It was just like, he's guilty. Yeah, let's indict him.
It's
And it was
right.
there was nothing there to it.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, their leadership, both in the House and the Senate, primarily House, are going to pay a price for letting the radical activists pull their strings, just like Pope Stephen VI paid with his life for what the radicals egged him on to do with that cadaver synod.
So let me try to tie something here with a little. I don't think the Democrats stepped in it. I think they know exactly what they're doing. Then they're staking out their territory in the same way they did against tieback Tim Hubbard. Remember what I said to Tim Hubbard? They don't like Tim Hubbard speaking in the area that they own, which is symbolism.
Oh,
we don't give a damn what
you conflated. Tim Harper.
Tim Harper. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that Tim Harper was operating in the area of symbolism, and they don't they don't care what you do in reality. What they do care about is your symbolic movement. And what they did, like you
don't appropriate our symbolism.
But what they did was they literally put the papal vestments on him so that they could symbolically take him off. They symbolically chopped his fingers off. They literally they were doing symbolism through the whole thing, which is all this impeachment trial is against Trump, is symbolism. They are
vicarious victory.
They are operating in the area of the symbols that they want to command. And they don't really care what the reality is. Look at the BLM riots versus that ridiculous what they call insurrection. Okay? They just pick whatever they want to call it. And so it's you know, it's all symbolism. That's all it is.
It's a vicarious victory. It's not a real victory. And Tom, I tell you, I'll use an example. When I was in high school and they got ready, well, when I was in elementary school, the high school would get ready for homecoming. And always on Thursday night, the night before, we had a bonfire. And yes, this was put on by the school. Right. And you know what they would do at this bonfire? They would dress up a mannequin in the uniform of their opponent for the next night and burn the effigy. There was high schools, public high schools doing it. Boy, we've changed a lot since then.
Oh, it's just evil now. You just can't do that. I had a conversation. I said, we got to get back to burning people in effigy. And he was like, oh, no.
Oh.
Hate speech. You'll get yanked off Facebook.
I might get arrested for.
But yet they're trying to burn the Trump presidency in effigy, and Facebook and YouTube's all over it.
So this is a nice piece from Sooner Politics. Everybody needs to check out the posthumous excommunication of President Trump. It's from February 8th this year. It's got a nice punchline at the end. Perhaps it's the hard lessons learned during the era of the 9th century of how the Great Commission of the Christian Church was usurped by folks who were more preoccupied with politics than piety and proselytes.
That's right. Thank you. I made that up all by myself,
That's
Tom.
a good line. You didn't write that. You just made that up. All right. The Stitt administration fires back at a critical report of how Oklahoma spent CARES Act money. And the CARES Act money is CARES. And what does that stand for? Anybody?
I don't
know what CARES stands for. I don't care what it stands for, but
hey, Tom, if it's a big radical thing coming out of Washington, it's always got a nice name to it. It's all about children too.
Yeah.
So this is the Stitt administration fires back by Cassandra Sweetman. This is from Oklahoma City KFOR. Decisions and processes on how the CARES Act dollars were spent in Oklahoma are under scrutiny. I'm sorry. And soon, members of Governor Kevin Stitt's administration team will meet with a legislative oversight group. Well, that ought to fix it. On a critical assessment release Wednesday. I'm totally cynical. Totally cynical. So tell us about the Stitt administration. How's this other thing tie in? Who's John Budd? How's this tie into this?
Okay, well, this just caught me by surprise because Stitt's doing the Twitter thing, just like Trump. And on Thursday, just out of nowhere, he's just raving about this great COO he's got, John Budd. And I'm like, what brought this about? And I couldn't find anything. So I said, well, something's about to hit. And sure enough, the next day it did.
Van's spidey sense started tingling.
Because the next day, all of this comes out. And who does it point to? his basically his chief operating officer, his chief of staff, if you will. And so on Saturday, without mentioning the lawmaker's name, I talked to one of the people on the oversight committee, LOFT, which is another acronym. It's an oversight thing about transparency. And my source told me privately, he says, man, that report could have been a lot tougher. He says, believe me, there was a lot of language pulled that could have been gone even far worse. So, yeah, so it's an interesting deal, and it tells me
a little bit lost, Van. Explain this tweet. This is Twitter via Sooner Politics. Last Thursday, Stitt was raving about his COO Bud. John Budd John Budd puts his heart and soul into making state government better for the people of Oklahoma. There's no doubt his work with Governor's Solutions Task Force has saved lives across our state. I said Monday, and I'll say it again, we can't thank you enough. That's Stitt talking to John Budd. What's he thanking him for? How did John Budd save lives?
Well, as the Democrats would have you know, he meant well. And that's what's important.
Exactly.
Maybe we should try that here on 3D Politics.
Yeah, well,
he tried, therefore he did.
On one level, you got to understand that, it's considered to be good leadership to defend your team, okay? And he is defending his team, so I get that.
It's also CYA.
Well, that's true too, because where does the buck stop, right? So yeah, I mean, this stuff, there's a laundry list on here, right, folks. Look it up. It's, it's a problem, because you have to wonder, how are we in an orderly way taking care of our priorities to make our people safe?
All right. Here's from the story. It's my fault. The LOFT stands for the Legislative Office for Fiscal Transparency.
That's right.
That's a hell of a lofty goal, no doubt about it.
That's right.
A 188-page report is a result of a months-long effort by the Legislative Office for Fiscal Transparency. Legislators asked LOFT with looking into how the state spent the coronavirus relief funds to provide transparency for them and the public.
Yeah.
Can we get a transparency oversight committee for the transparency committee?
Well, yeah, and that's just it. In last year, I largely played this role because we started APAC. Now, I got to give credit to Charles McCall. That was the agency performance audit group. And they brought in, actually it was a few years ago, they brought in, a bunch of outside people. In fact, the chairman of it is a friend of mine, Bob Sullivan, former Republican candidate for governor, head of an oil company. And I talked to him, and they did a series of audits, and every 3 years they were supposed to go through all the top agencies. Well, as soon as the first ones came back, Charles McCall sealed them, and he only let the legislature see it, wouldn't let the media see it. And I kept crying a stink here. I got Trey Savage with NonDoc to team up with me. I went into the chief of staff's office there for the speaker, and I finally got him to say, okay, I'll release him today. And I got him. And, come on. But the problem was Charles McCall wanted that power to himself and to the legislators himself. So they replaced this outside team of some of our finest in the state and industry and retired government officials, judges, federal judges, all these, and replaced it with their own bunch. And now it looks like in Stitt's narrative this is the legislature sniping at him because they're at odds. This is a problem. I'd much rather it have been the old APAC where you had people outside of politics that were reviewing the politicians.
Well, I mean, so the report criticized the state for lacking transparency and accountability, blah, 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 blah. The report zeroed in on charges like $510,000 spent on cleaning Capitol complex building windows. I don't clean windows for a living, but that seems reasonable. I don't know, $510,000 doesn't seem like especially if you're trying to clean viruses out of cracks in the window. Seems like 510 is pretty damn good deal to me. More than $18 million updating welcome centers and $2 million campaign inviting tourism to the state. So I really don't know. CARES, CARES, is R stand for recovery? I don't know. I don't know what it stands for, but what I'm saying,
it was the bailout. It was
I know.
the
If
COVID bailout money.
If the R stands for recovery, then $18 million for welcome centers and $2 million for inviting tourism would be part of recovery. I'm just saying the idea that I could step in and tell Tom Brady how to throw the ball later.
No, this is costs incurred by keeping your people safe. That's what the federal bill was put out there for. You're going to run into extra expenses.
So it would not be appropriate to spend on tourism.
It's not meant to be an economic stimulus package.
When they make an illegal law, it is imperative that you stick to the illegal law.
Up to
because
us.
Otherwise, what are you? You're I don't know. You're doubly illegal or something. I don't know.
Double probation is what that's called.
But it is correct. It was supposed to have been for, keeping people safe, and we're spending on tourism.
That's a problem.
I'm good with that because, hey, it's, made up money anyway. So why don't we spend it on anything?
Now you sent it. So the report also stated money could have been better spent on things like a more strategic deposit into the unemployment insurance trust fund. Damn it. You know what? Let me tell you when to scratch your itch, okay? And investing into health initiatives like testing and contact tracing. You know how I feel about contact tracing. Every member of every Congress and every elected official should submit to contact tracing, not for virus, but for basic contact tracing.
Also virus.
Who you're and the children, who you're meeting, why you're meeting, what relationships you're building. I want all contact tracing, 100% total transparency from anyone who's elected on any governmental form for any reason. 100% contact tracing. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, Oldham's going to call this a stretch, but I'm going to say this. If the government shuts your business down, your way of making money, I think there is some moral connection to the Fifth Amendment here of just compensation when the government takes something from you.
No, the government can't take it. That's the Fifth Amendment. They can't take it from you.
This point.
Yes,
what are you saying, Van?
What I'm saying is when they take away your opportunity to go to work by this emergency thing, then fine, you pay my wages. That's the argument for the worker. And so if you've got an unemployment system at the state that is so broken that people waited, 3 months to get their first check? That's broken, folks. And if they spent the money on fixing the unemployment system, I'm okay with that part in a relative sense.
This is why it all falls apart. Okay, the last phrase of the Fifth Amendment is that no private property should be taken for public use without just compensation.
Yes.
So and I've talked to numerous lawyers who go, oh, that's the shutdown, that's a taking. That's what they call it, a taking. And because it is, when they say you can't go to work for the sake of everybody else, they are taking the wages you would have earned. Right. They are taking away your job. They must justly compensate you for that, or they can't do it. Now, here's the problem. You and I don't have to pay for it because they don't have the right to go there in the first place. Otherwise, they're dictators, they're created special, and we're not. We're all created equal.
Right.
So either we're created equal and they can't go there, or we all agree that it was good for public use and we pay for it. We're not going to do that.
That was a pretty nice callback to the minimum wage where we started the whole show off, is that they are literally taking the money from those teenagers.
Yeah.
They want to work for minimum wage. And so, like, if I'm with Belinda and I want to walk over a volcano and I can make $1 million and they say it's too dangerous, they owe me $1 million.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, if you're going to take this federal money and spend it on something, that part I was okay with. All right. That part I was okay with. Now I
What
know
what
Oldham
part?
has
What?
much more fundamental arguments, and he's got valid arguments. I'm just saying, in the very narrow sense, I understand that as being a legitimate expenditure in keeping with what Congress said to spend it on.
Well, the only
You
thing is,
guys know, Oldham, before you get started, we're at the top of the hour. You guys should always be warned every 15 minutes. Tommy will interrupt. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The American Constitutional Republic affairs of state in Oklahoma, the beliefs, principles, opinions, and views of people like you. This is 3D Politics Live with your director and host, Tommy McKay, featuring David Van and David Oldham, both here with me every Monday night to discuss all things important, municipal, state, and federal. Now, as we get out of here, kids, we got big stuff coming up next week. Got a special guest we're going to talk about. But what else before we finish off this CARE thing? We've got marijuana discussion coming. Anybody else?
no, we're good.
Van.
Well, yeah, we were going to have some people on tonight. We've had to move all of it to next week. We'll have a lot more details. And Chip Paul has been penciled in. He is the author of State Question 788, the driving force to get this, for good or bad, done. And he's going to join us live next Monday night at 7 p.m. Look,
And let's
be
just
here.
let
Tell you.
everybody know in lead up to what's coming next week is there are a bunch of bills
Yeah.
that are based on 788, and some of them actually going very draconian. There was an interesting exchange with Ron Durbin, the attorney who's satisfying, most people's attorney needs for the dealing with the OMMA. And he basically laid it out as an either or. You either raise prices on licensing, or you cap licensing and thereby raise the value of it and raise prices or change how it's done. I don't exactly understand all that yet, but it was not a get rid of. There was no get rid of licensing and so forth. So somewhere in government, they want to make more money.
Yeah.
And so we've got to talk about this because the legislature is after everybody's freedom so that they can make more money and have more of people's money that they don't deserve.
I got to say,
none of it.
it's not just simply the government that wants to make money. It's industry. It's like marijuana industry on marijuana industry crime. That the entities that already have the licenses and are already operating in business don't want any more licenses. You don't see.
That's exactly one of the bills.
That's called
the worst
protectionism.
bill out there is exactly that on September 1st, whoever has a license or is in the channel to get a license gets one, and no more will ever be issued after that.
So once again, the lie in the legislation is like the minimum wage law, is that they pretend they're protecting one person or entity when they're not. What they're doing is they're protecting the entities that are already involved in the racket. Yep. And the people that are in. So my point is, you don't see. So they claim we're trying to protect the customer by having licenses and making sure that everybody's smoking pot safely. When really, the fact is, they're just trying to make sure that no other people get involved, and they're protecting their own licenses from any other.
And without the scheme, that doesn't happen.
There's no. You don't see consumers down there clamoring for licensing to protect them. Consumers aren't cared about licensing to protect them. They want numerous choices. Van, sorry.
Yeah, except that one caveat to this is, if you're a little mom and pop's business, maybe you grow your own, you only do outdoor grows, maybe you're organic, and you only have a certain model you're going to follow. You're not trying to get rich. You just want to make sure that, you're fitting that niche. Well, guess what? If your annual sales don't reach a certain amount where you got a monthly average that's over a certain dollar amount, you'll lose your license because you're not big enough.
Well, right. And I know we're going to talk about this. We're excited to have Chip Paul, author of State Question 788 and founder of OK4U Cannabis Industry Association. He is going to be, he is scheduled to be on our show next week, Monday. And with protectionists, it says here, HB 2272 would radically change Oklahoma's medical marijuana industry with protectionist policies, including caps on licenses, lotteries for available licenses. Lottery tickets cost at least $12,500 to get a raffle ticket. And underperforming dispensaries would be forced to close so new shops can open. Major revenue raising measure. Will state question 640 rules apply to the floor votes? What does that mean?
That means, and this was passed in 92, if a bill raises revenue, net result to the state, it must either get a vote of the people after it's passed and signed by the governor, or invoke an emergency where you get 75% of both houses plus the governor. That's the only way around it.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, you bring it to the vote of the people because it's their taxes that you're raising.
Gotcha.
I say taxes, it's revenue the state's attaining. Revenue raising measures, not tax raising measures.
Gotcha.
And remember that the medical marijuana industry is far and away the biggest industry right at the moment in Oklahoma,
right?
In terms of new revenue.
Yeah.
And so with that, there are people out there who want to, number one, capitalize on it, make more money. Number two, they also want to weed out all the little guys, all that freedom stuff. Just shut up and sit down, because we don't want you to have the opportunity.
Yeah, the mile high picture of this, there are other bills that are going to require them to get more insurance coverage. And one of them was written by an insurance agent in the legislature, don't you know?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of.
We're supposed to not be allowed to participate in anything that could benefit them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what's happening, Tom, is it's the victim of its own success. It is far more popular than we ever thought it would be. Now, Oldham and I talked about this, and I got to give Oldham his due. I said this is moving the football down the field the right direction to pass 788. He understood, it's got some merit, but he says it's still not liberty, it's license. And that's sometimes the worst enemy of liberty, because it looks like liberty and it's not. And Oldham's right here. It's going the other direction right now, and I'm not a happy camper.
Well, it's unfortunate they can sell these things through their popular maneuvers by calling it, they call minimum, I'm sorry, but I'm stuck on minimum wage this week.
You're
They
right.
say minimum wage is helping the worker, and it doesn't. And they say this is going to help the consumer be safe, and it doesn't. Oldham.
Do you remember a few years ago when Dewey Bartlett was mayor of Tulsa, and there was the police strike? And the police were all up in arms about, how much they were getting paid. And ultimately it came down to, everybody stays at their same wage, and we increase the number of officers, or we keep the rookie officers on the force, or we raise the wages of everybody and get rid of the last class and just put them out of work. And the union voted overwhelmingly to fire the new rookies.
Yes.
You remember that? And they fired all the new rookies, and they said, "Screw you, we want our pay."
Well, and to go further, the city council.
Wage, that's all of these. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, it goes back. Okay, Oldham, it goes back further, going all the way back to when Bill LaFortune was mayor. He kept saying we need to increase the budget because we need more officers, and they kept getting more money but not hiring more officers. They were just padding everybody's salaries and not going. And this is the same thing that's happening with teachers and school boards, and they somehow get away with it, blaming the legislature when the school board's the one screwing over the teachers.
Right.
Well, it's the districts that don't pay teachers. They keep complaining that the Oklahoma legislature isn't providing funds, which is bull crap. The Oklahoma legislature provides minimums for teachers that have to be paid. The Oklahoma legislature provides a minimum wage for teachers, and who screws teachers? Districts. The district screws it. If your teacher doesn't get paid enough, complain to the district. Don't complain to the legislature. Okay? It's total crap. Also, check out my blog. I wrote a nice little blog against Dr. Gist. It's entitled "Dr. Gist Speaks Slurred Science."
But Tom, how do we find that? I couldn't find that today.
Well, you find that on 3dpoliticslive.com.
All right. I'll look for that.
And you need to see if you can find that. I also submitted a 250-word edited version of that to the Tulsa World. We'll just see if they print it. Somehow, I wonder if it'll make it.
Come on, egg them on. Ask if they're man enough to print it, Tom.
Well, they believe me, they don't need my subscription. But anyway, check out 3dpoliticslive.com. Check us out every Monday night right here on Facebook Live. Anything else before we get out of here, guys?
No, I'll make sure. Tom, you and I need to get together, make sure that's up. I don't see it.
It's up there, but it's not accessible through the website. We don't have a link to it, but I have put it on the 3dpoliticsblogspot.com.
I'll look for it.
We'll find a way to make sure it's accessible. Oldham, anything else before we get out of here?
No, good show, guys.
And what do you say, Van? Anything else?
Looking forward to going down tomorrow night to Okmulgee to visit with the Republicans.
Oh, very good.
Me there. Yep.
Very good.
Another thing. Wednesday, I'm going to be at the Capitol handing out the playing cards to the top of the class. The honor roll.
And here we are again.
Oh, one more thing. A former guest on our show, young Taylor Woodrum, candidate for legislature.
Right.
He just took a position as chief of staff for Sean Roberts.
Excellent.
Oh, awesome. Very good.
I think we're making progress.
There's only one on the staff.
It doesn't matter. Next week, Chip Paul, author of State Question 788 and founder of OK4U. So make sure and tune in. We are looking forward to having Chip Paul show up next week. Once again, thank everybody for showing up and watching. David Van from SoonerPolitics.org, David Oldham from ConstitutionalGrounds.com, and of course me, Tommy McKay, your fine host right here at 3D Politics Live every Monday night. We'll see you guys next time.
Good night, everybody.